Someday I will buy galley with good horse.
Hello and welcome to today's review. Today we are going to be looking at a machine from the JarnFolks out in the deep periphery, but completely opposite from where I live. The reason why I'm doing a little bit more work this week, well, let's say this week, it'll be a little while here. I'm on a round trip au frais de la reine to Terra in order to discuss a variety of machines that have shown up during the recent attack on Artru. But while I'm doing that, I am still working on getting some design reviews out and just doing my average work on all sorts of machines people bring me while we're on that trip. It's going to be a little while, but it's going to be, well, hopefully fun. So we are going to look at the Zaku MS-05, or MS-05 Zaku would be the more appropriate term, I guess, for it, which is actually the first machine, at least to my knowledge now, which uses those handheld weapons, or modular handheld weapon equipment. This is the mech that basically inspired Operation Zeta in the Republic of the Sphere with the Leo and its derivatives. And is it a great machine? Well, we're going to have to look into it. It's quite odd. Its history is a bit odd, but it seems to be in limited production still. This machine dates from 3081, which might seems to be a little bit out of date now. It is the first battle mech actually built in JarnFolk territory. They started building that thing once they dealt with another organization called the Clave, who moved a bunch of people into JarnFolk territory. They built an embassy at first, and after the embassy was there, they took an agreement to settle a few local planets and to settle a few of the JarnFolk's planet that are not heavily exploited. The Clave, we don't quite sure where they come from. They seem to have this similar kind of history as our own Flanagan family. They're establishing themselves in the JarnFolk territory because they seem to be travelers or gypsies flying around the inner sphere, or at least the periphery, and they needed a place to actually have production plants and replacement parts and just to have people settle if they're not able to survive in deep space. A bit of an interesting story. I might try to see if I can talk to some people on Terra about it. I don't have much more details than that. What happened at first? Well, they did that in 3067, so that's almost 100 years ago now. And the first thing that they did, well, they were asked by the JarnFolk to build an industrial mech factory, which is a good thing to have, and where MS-01 to 4 comes from. Those are basic industrial machines that the JarnFolks have been using, and the Clave probably have been using extensively for things like farming, shipping, repairing, building, and those kinds of things. They were getting problems with pirates and probably dark caste from the clan, so they needed some military force. The Clave had some equipment, but they needed things that would be produced fairly quickly, fairly efficiently, and support the local economy at the same time as supporting the local militias. So they built that 45-ton average machine. This one is fun because we can see the magazines. Here, those are magazines for the rotary AC2, one of the base model uses on the IPS area. It's not something we see very often on those production sketches. Fairly cheap, around 4 million C-bill for a 45-ton mech in this day and age. It's actually pretty decent, and the only real fancy bit of equipment on it is endo steel. The Clave have massive amounts of endo steel mills, apparently, in their traveling jump ships and around Trondheim. So getting endo steel is pretty easy for them. There's double heat sinks on the machine as well, but that's also because that's the only thing they build at Principality Manufacturing, which is the production plant for this machine. So, I mean, logistics-wise, you're not going to build single heat sinks if you're building double heat sinks for everything else. It ends up being simpler to just build one thing rather than multiple things. The engine is a very basic 225 Fusion. Nothing out of the ordinary. Weapons-wise, well, this is where it's fun. Like most of those modular machines, you've got options, but this one doesn't have very many. There's two main options. A rotary AC2 machine guns. We've got a picture of the machine gun here. So you see that drum here that was on the waist of the other one right there. Or a shoulder-mounted bazooka-style launcher, which is a Thunderbolt 10. Those are both fairly modern weapons, kind of impressive for them to use that. But once you get down into it, both the rotary autocannon and the Thunderbolt missile launcher are not super complex pieces of equipment, let's say. Producing ammo for it is really easy. There's nothing complex with that. You get 9 tons of standard plates, pretty decent on a 45-ton mech. You're going to not have the maximum, but you're going to be able to tank quite a few things, let's say, and you go about 86 kilometers per hour on a full run with a jump range of 150 meters. So you're slower than your Phoenix Hawk, as an example, but you're still able to get into it. The opposite arm from the main gun generally mounts a small shield, and you can either have a 4-tube SRM mounted underneath the shield or a hatchet, depending on what you want to mount. Fewer options than all those other Operation Zeta machines that we've seen, probably because it's the first one in that line, but those things are easy to swap in and out, apparently. I've played with their RAC2 model, personally. I've added one with the RAC2 here on my trip, and we looked it over, tried to see if it was worth buying, basically. Not a thing that I would jump to get. It was not produced in large amount from what I've heard. There's an evolution of the design called the Zaku 2, obviously. And this one has been in massive production and has been sold to Aus Korea in very large fashion. There's a few issues with it, mainly that the legs assembly is pretty weak. If you try to dead from above with a Zaku 1, you're probably going to mess up your legs before you mess up anything you land on. So be careful about that. But the cockpit itself is really nice. It's not a small cockpit, but it's fairly compact. And you can keep hands on throttle and stick rather than have to flip all sorts of switches and do all sorts of things, which is a thing we're seeing more and more in newer mechs, which is a thing that I really like. It has a distinctive look, but it does look primitive. Once you dig into it, those lines, that particular looks at boxy on some places, but rounded on others. It's a little bit of an odd duck, but I kind of enjoy how it looks. We've got specification sheets available that I will put up on the ComNet. One with the rotary AC2, hatchet, and small shield. And the other one is your bazooka configuration. Thunderbolt 10, SRM4, small shield. I haven't messed enough with them to know which one would be best. I mean, since you can swap out that hatchet for the SRM4 at any time, probably a good thing. Thunderbolt 10s are okay as far as a weapon goes, in my opinion. So your mileage may vary, like with many of those Operation Zeta mechs. So I thank you very much for listening to me for so long. We will see each other pretty soon. We've got other things that I'm going to send over to Lloyd's of New London and get them to send home, and then from home they process it, and when it's processed, we upload it to the ComNet. So have a nice day, and see you guys later. Bye-bye.